Welcome to the Cult is King podcast. This is the voice of Rambling Bones, joined by my co-host, the Duke.
Yo.
And on today's episode, I picked House of Frankenstein 1997, which was a made-for-TV movie that I think was on like NBC or something.
So you want to tell us a little bit about why you chose this gem, House of Frankenstein?
Yes, so the reason I chose this movie is because when I was but a wee bab,
A wee bab,
I saw this. I distinctly remember seeing this movie. And by distinctly remember, I mean I remember like little images, and for years after I'd seen it, I tried to find it again. But when you type in like Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula, you'll get the original House of Frankenstein or House of Dracula, or you'll get Monster Squad. But eventually, I did finally stumble across this movie and realized, oh, this is the thing that I had seen. And we watched it, and it is not anything like what I remember.
But this is the movie.
This is the movie.
Keep in mind, too, this is not to be confused with the much better 1944 House of Frankenstein.
No. This isn't the movie I remember bits and pieces of it, but how I remembered it was different. But it is the movie that I saw so many years ago.
I tell you what, since I'm not sure anybody's going to have seen this movie, this one's pretty off the beaten path. Would you maybe give us a little idea of what goes down in this?
So it's a 2-part miniseries, so there's kind of a lot. And I'm going to try to give you maybe just the gist of it, rather than try to give you a point-by-point synopsis. Spoilers, by the way, of course. So the movie follows Detective Coyle. He's like the main character, and he's trying to solve a series of gruesome murders committed by what the press dubbed the Midnight Raptor. In reality, the Raptor is a master vampire named Crispian Grimes, who is the owner of a nightclub called House of Frankenstein.
It's like this goth nightclub. Imagine like if you're watching an episode of CSI and they're going to investigate a nightclub. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Sleazy and gothy and...
Pretty much. And Grimes is also like a real estate tycoon type. And so he's committing all of these murders with his werewolf underling to like buy up land.
Which, for the record, it's like this long-haired German guy who looks like he would be in the Scorpions.
Yes, that's actually a perfect description of him. And so the werewolf underling accidentally, when killing another guy, wounds a girl named Grace, who is Detective Coyle's love interest. And so she's becoming a werewolf now. And then the master vampire also falls in love with her, and Frankenstein's there.
Yeah, sometime in the background of why all this is happening, I guess Crispian wanted the Frankenstein monster's body as like a set piece for his nightclub, but they managed to thaw him out and he escapes because he's still very much unalive.
Yeah. Crispian has like this, I want to say German scientist at the very least, who like goes on an expedition to the Arctic, brings back Frankenstein's body, and the scientist of course wants to thaw him out. Crispian just wants him as a set piece for the nightclub. I don't know why he couldn't just buy a fake one, why he needs the real life Frankenstein's monster, as nobody's gonna know the difference.
He's got a lot of money. People, with a lot of money do crazy things.
I guess part of the thing is that he's lived forever, so he's bored. They don't use that as an explanation as to why, but that's what I'm going with in my head. And Frankenstein's monster does a whole lot of nothing for the majority of the movie.
Yeah, he pretty much wanders around with this. I guess he's not technically homeless, but like this very like just kind of poor,
World War II vet.
right? And they just kind of hang out for the entire first half of the miniseries.
Yeah, him and the vet it's essentially like in Bride of Frankenstein, where the monster runs into the blind old man and the blind old man sort of teaches him a little bit of language. The vet reteaches the Frankenstein monster language.
And he's a much quicker study in this movie.
Yes. The ending of the movie is the master vampire kills himself because he gets rejected by Grace. Simp.
There is a lot in between there, but it would take a very long time to go through every plot point in this movie.
Yeah, and we'll tap some of those points in the discussion, but that is basically it.
So you've been this movie has been haunting your psyche for years, and now you have seen it. How does it feel, Mr. Bones?
I don't know. The movie, I know that you were not a big fan of this.
It had its moments, but there were lots of parts that were long and joyless.
I mean, I think I enjoyed it throughout, but it's not very good. And the plot I remember the movie from my childhood was that a werewolf and Dracula are both in love with this girl who is also in love with the detective. So the detective and the vampire being in love, I got that right. But in my brain, it was the werewolf and the vampire feuding for the girl, and the Frankenstein's monster helping the detective to defeat both of them, because him being a monster, he had like insight into dealing with them. That's not at all. Like, the werewolf, before the first part is over, he gets killed.
Yeah, of course, then, the love interest becomes a werewolf.
But yeah, it's like, oh, I remember him playing a much bigger role, and he doesn't even get killed by anyone important.
No.
Crispian has a lawyer, and he has the lawyer shoot the werewolf.
And if I'm not mistaken, the lawyer is one of the vampires, is he not, or is it just associated with them?
He's not a vampire. He's just associated.
I'll just say, might have some very clever commentary about the blood-sucking nature of lawyers there,
Oh. But I remember watching it and thinking, wow, this lawyer does a lot more than a lot of than the main characters.
Right. Well, and as we kind of talked about earlier, the Frankenstein's monster is sidelined for a lot of this.
Part 1 is, I would say they put all of the buildup in part 1, which they do put all the buildup in part 1, but they also put a lot of nothing in part 1. That's the problem, is the writing for the movie is not very tight.
No, and the single worst thing about the movie, I think we could both agree, is the pacing.
Yeah, no, the pacing is really off, and it's like most of the action is stuffed into the second part, and that's when the Frankenstein's monster actually does stuff. He sort of kills Crispian, but he doesn't kill him good enough, and so Crispian comes back and kills him. No, I lied.
No, he escaped.
He escapes. So there's a giant, fire explosion, and at the very end, you see Frankenstein's monster getting onto, a boat, and he's just, kind of covered in soot. His clothes are, fine.
Yeah, he held up pretty well.
he held up real well in that explosion.
Yeah, this version of the monster does not seem to have an aversion to fire, seeing, as he's only slightly miffed about being exploded.
Yeah, I mean, his clothes were very, very resistant as well. The main characters do a surprisingly little. They don't kill the werewolf, and they don't kill Dracula, or he's not even Dracula. That's one thing. It's House of Frankenstein, but it's not like a resurrection of the Universal monsters so much, because it's not Dracula, it's not the Talbot werewolf. It's some German guy, Crispian, and then it's the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I don't know why they needed to reteach him speech if it's the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, because I'm pretty sure he could speak.
Well, I know he's almost kind of like a hybrid between the two. One thing I thought was interesting is it almost reminded me, I can't remember if it was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman or if it was actually the old 1944 House of Frankenstein, because they introduced him in one of those movies as being frozen in a block of ice. So it seemed like every once in a while, like with Armando, the veteran we were talking about, there's kind of a callback to one of the old movies, but for the most part, it's very much divorced from like, the Universal monster movies.
I'd almost say they are callbacks, but we don't have the rights. These are, Frankenstein is public domain, so we're skirting the line of, are we going to get sued by Universal? This movie actually could have been owned by Universal. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, I haven't done my due diligence here. I was under the impression that Universal was involved and that they were trying to, reinvigorate their Universal Monsters line. That might not be true, and if it is true, it's kind of a weird way to go about it, considering it's so far removed.
I'd be inclined to say that that's probably not what happened, but at the same time, the late 90s, I believe Universal started trying to re-release a lot of their old movies and were pushing the home video market.
Oh yeah, no, I remember the commercials, and we still have somewhere the big box set of all the old VHS tapes of the Universal monster movies.
Yeah, so it could have been tied to that, but I'm thinking that it probably is completely divorced from Universal. The problem with researching this movie is there's not a lot of information out there on it.
Right, no, it was an uphill battle even finding this.
Yeah, we found it on YouTube. The other places you may find it are shady websites where they've probably taken the YouTube rip and they've now put it on a DVD and are going to send it to your home address that they now have.
Well, yes, and to give you what we know, to let you guys know what we suffered for you guys. Not only was, YouTube the only place we could find it, it's obviously been taken from somebody's taped on TV, so there's lots of parts that repeat after every commercial break would have happened. It's pretty grainy. I think the movie itself is also just a little too dark in terms of lighting, but it's hard to tell, seeing as it is a VHS ripped. And we are missing 5 minutes of the first half, so we did our best here.
Yeah, it's not terribly easy to find. I'm not sure if I would recommend watching it on YouTube, because it's not a great version of the film.
What I would say, though, is this is a nice little 90s time capsule. It's funny because there are lots of scenes, especially with the detective, that make me think that I'm watching the original CSI.
Speaking of CSI, one of the characters, the only actor who I recognize in the entire thing, there might be, some of the actors might have done other things of note, but was Georgia Fox, who is Sarah in CSI, if you've ever watched the original CSI. But it has that CSI feel, but it's not the color green.
Yeah. Doesn't have a nice green film on everything.
Well, that green and blue 2000s tint they want to put on everything and make you puke because it's so ugly.
Yeah, that brings back some memories.
It's also kind of an interesting time capsule because it's a mini-series. I guess with Netflix now, we pretty much have mini-series again, but there are mini-series that get multiple seasons. Like Stranger Things Season 1, if they had just ended it after the first season, that would be the perfect mini-series, I guess.
Yeah.
But you don't get many made-for-TV movies these days.
Well, and I'm going to be honest, I think this one would have been better as a movie as opposed to a mini-series, because I think that there's so much that could be cut out from this movie that would not in any way be missed.
There's a lot of characters, and it sort of takes the whole runtime for you to realize who some of these characters are.
Or even who the main character is. When we first started, I could not have told you that the detective was the main character because we split between the vampire, we split between Frankenstein, the woman who got scratched. Like, it's not immediately obvious who's going to be important when you're watching it.
And honestly, of all the characters, in my opinion, the vampire was actually probably the best, both acted and as far as, ooh, I'm interested in this character.
It was cool because he kind of had I think it was before the movie was made, but he kind of has like an American Psycho kind of style to him. Like, he's got like the hair that's like...
You mean he looks business professional?
I don't know. It just... Well, he's also, a psycho/sociopath with dead eyes,
Yeah. He's got that charisma.
He's got those suspenders.
Mm-hmm. But Detective Coyle, he's really like, if you were to make like a stereotype tough guy detective, I've seen it all.
Yeah. His voice sounds like a very angry Columbo.
Yeah, like a slightly younger, angry Columbo, who does not react the best in normal situations.
And he's not like terribly unlikable, but you have to wonder because our female lead falls for him pretty quickly. And the question in all of our minds is why?
Yeah.
This angry, dirty, sweaty little man.
Yeah. That's the best way to describe Detective Coyle, an angry, sweaty little man.
Who's vaguely Italian.
He might be vaguely Italian. I know we thought this movie was in New York when we first watched it, or at the start, but it's definitely in LA.
Yeah.
Probably shot in Canada, actually.
Probably. I will say, real quick, I'd like to talk about the special effects a little bit because they were kind of interesting in both good and bad ways.
It's weird because it's like they had money, but sometimes it would feel like they went cheap on some things but went hard on others. So when like Crispian turns into a vampire, there's one problem with it. He's got floppy ears.
Yes, and real quick before we talk more about the costume, so to imagine this, when he goes like full vampire mode, he looks like he's like a giant, like 7-foot tall, like gargoyle looking thing. If you think like the old Fantasia Night on Bald Mountain gargoyle, that's kind of what I picture here.
Yeah, that's pretty close. Definitely gargoyle.
Or for, you younger people, if you're playing Skyrim and you turn into the vampire.
Yeah.
And he's like in this big, like, I don't know, like latex or something like.
I mean, it's got to be like a bodysuit or something.
Yes, and he's like huge, but as you alluded to, the issue is he has like these big, like.
They're like floppy. I think they were going for like floppy bat ears, but instead
it kind of looks like subpar, like a Batman hood kind.
I wouldn't even say like Batman ears. They're just silly floppy dog ears that are a little pointy.
And yeah, and the worst part is whenever he does anything, they wiggle. Like, you can obviously see that these are like rubber or something.
I think for the most part, there isn't a ton of focus on the ears, but that first time he transforms, there's like a momentum to it. So like his body sort of shakes at the end, and you get a strong, just a solid wiggle in there, and it's super obvious, and it takes you so far out of the moment.
And I was kind of surprised that they went, especially for a made-for-TV movie, that they went in that direction with the vampire at all, and they didn't give him more of a traditional vampire. I guess it was supposed to be, bigger and better. And there's lots of other vampires that actually appear in the movie, too, and they have that appearance as well.
Well, they go more classic vampire than... Like, nobody else gets the bodysuit.
They do. Remember that scene where... I want to say it's when somebody's being abducted and she turns and there's like vampires everywhere.
No, that's all him.
Oh,
okay. That's all. You just didn't understand the scene.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm a smooth brain. You have to have a high intelligence to understand House of Frankenstein.
You see,
1997.
That was a scene that I thought was cool because just one of Crispian's abilities is he's just super fast, pretty much like teleports around.
Okay,
And
I guess
so
I hadn't realized that.
that is, I believe it's Georgia Fox's character. I believe her name is Felicity in the movie.
Yes.
And she is Grace, the girl who turns into a werewolf. She is her roommate. And Crispian, I'm actually pretty sure he was after Grace, but, you know, if you're there, you're there. I'm going to kidnap you instead. And so, like, she's trying to escape, and everywhere she turns, he's there. And that was a scene I do remember as a kid. And it's not as scary as it was as a kid.
It's still one of the better parts
It's still one of the better parts of the movie. That, and there's a part where the werewolf guy is also after Grace, and he is in her apartment. The first half of that scene is kind of silly. The second half, where he's doing more werewolf things, is cooler.
Well, I did say they did a pretty good job in most of the scenes with the transition from, like, the man to the wolf. Like, the one part where there's a part where Grace is running from him because basically Crispian is PO'd because after, you know, she got away from him the first time the werewolf was murdering the other guy. Well, now she's going to turn to werewolf, and Crispian doesn't want him creating more without his permission. So he sends the werewolf. I want to say, is his name Hans, or did I imagine that? Did I just see a German man and go, that guy's name is Hans?
I'm pretty sure there's at least one guy in the movie named Hans.
Whatever. Any case, the werewolf is basically chasing her through the apartment. And there's this one part where he's in, like, you know, his dog form, and she, like, closes, like, the exit to one of the stairs, and then she looks through the little window, and he's in human form again. And then you kind of see his, like, arm, like, disappear from his jacket, and the jacket collapses, and it's the wolf again. I thought that was cool.
There's a lot of, like, digital, like, transition effects, but they actually aren't that bad. They are much better than, like, a Star Trek Next Generation episode. Like,
right.
Picture somebody turning into a monster in that. It looks better than that would.
It's kind of a mixed bag with the special effects and the shots, because every once in a while I'd be like, oh, that's really cool. And then other times I'd be like, wow, that's really cheesy and terrible.
That's the thing, is when I was watching the movie and you're going between those, oh, that's a horrible effect, or, oh, that's real nice. It's like, all right, so they had money, but why was the movie so expensive that they were cutting on little things, or was it a competency issue throughout?
Well, and, you know, maybe they just needed extra airtime on the network, but honestly, I still contend that this might have been a little. I don't think it would be a great movie by any means, but if they had maybe just taken the best stuff and focused the budget and made this a nice, just single, you know, 90 to 2 hour movie, 90 minutes to 2 hours, I think it would have been okay. Because I swear, we watched that first half of the movie, and I want to say that was like an hour, 20 minutes, because I want to say it was like 2 hour and 20 minute segments.
I think the movie is about 2 hours and 40 minutes, so that would probably be a good guesstimate.
I'm going to be honest, it wasn't so bad for the second half, but the first half, after we finished it, I looked at how long we'd been watching, and Lord knows it felt a lot longer.
And part of the reason I think it feels so long is, again, there's so much that happens, but, like, barely any of it is important.
No, very little of it, like, drives the plot along. And in fact, look, I know the movie's called House of Frankenstein, but the plot didn't really need Frankenstein.
No, not really.
And he has some cool parts, don't get me wrong, and there's some cool scenes with him. But considering that, one, he's not even responsible for killing Dracula, his big moment, or I should say Crispian, his big moment is kind of taken away from him because the vampire just comes back. They use him earlier so Crispian captures him at some point in the film and is going to use him to kill the detective, but, you know, and they do it they have this, like, shot collar on him, you know, and they're going to use him to kill him, and then they're going to set him free, or, you know, work with him if he kills this guy for Crispian, which, as the movie points out, I don't know why they thought a shot collar would kill a monster that's running on electricity. But the thing is that whole thing is resolved very quickly. Very quickly after that, he breaks free, and then he's a buddy with them, and then they're back at the castle. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Another character we haven't mentioned who is somewhat important is they're, like, early in the film, when they're like, looking for the Midnight Raptor, this serial killer, is this crazy like professor lady who keeps calling in and being like, I know who this is. This is a vampire. And like nobody believes her. And then she kind of plays a Van Helsing-esque role in like the second part of the film. But even then, you could have probably trimmed her and not.
I mean, they kept dropping her, but it's like, who is this woman? Like, why is she important? It'd be one thing if, all right, we introduced that she is telling the police that it's a vampire in one scene and they blow her off. And then later, when Coyle has the revelation in his head, he goes to her. Instead, it's like she keeps showing up because we have to remind the audience that she is a part of this movie.
And it doesn't do her any favors because while she's likable enough in the second half, you totally get why they blew her off in the first half. This lady is annoying.
Yeah.
And it's not like in those movies, too, where they, like, try to, like, slowly break the public or whoever or the main character into the fact that they might be dealing with something supernatural. So this lady's just straight up like, you got vampires.
She is very abrasive, and she would like you to know that you got vampires, and she's not going to shut up about it.
And it's weird, too, because they kind of do go their own way with the vampires just a little bit. In some ways, they're, like, very traditional in the sense that, like, crosses, vampires don't like religious artifacts. And they explain that in this movie is that vampires are actually, like, fallen angels.
Yeah, they're just demons.
Yeah, they're, like, demons, and that's why they're, like, having an aversion to, like, religious artifacts and stuff. There's a big scene about it, but other than that, I mean, it's a lot of your standard vampire fare, except for the fact that these vampires, like the original Dracula, do not burn up in the sunlight.
However, the whole religious blessed icons being good against vampires leads to Chekhov's urn full of mother's ashes.
Yes. So there's a part where once Detective Coyle has come around to the idea that they're dealing with vampires, he calls his sister and like tells her like, do we have any crosses? Do we have anything blessed by a priest? And their mom's ashes is the only thing that they have blessed by a priest.
And she, of course, does not believe him and doesn't go out and get anything. But when a vampire does show up and is going to kill her and her kid, she busts out the urn and kills the vampire with it.
I really actually enjoyed that scene because they introduced the urn before that shot, but there was no reason to think it was going to be important again. So it was like, this was very much like a Chekhov's gun, or Chekhov's urn if you prefer, but you didn't see it coming. Or at least I didn't. Maybe you were like, yep, they're going to use that urn.
No, it was a case of it was just ridiculous enough that it was like, oh, that was just a funny aside that the mother's urn's the only thing blessed in the house. It's not going to come up again. It's like, oh, nope, it comes up again.
That was a high point for me.
No, that was one of the highest points in the movie. Again, it's like I enjoyed this movie, but I also enjoyed movies like The Langoliers and
The Giant Claw.
The Giant Claw is a classic.
I love The Giant Claw. Can we just do that again for next week? Is just watch The Giant Claw again?
No, we have to watch 3-hour movies that only sort of feature how the Frankenstein's monster.
Speaking of the Frankenstein's monster, what do you think of the makeup for him?
I like that they didn't go green. He looks like a sort of like a walking corpse, or maybe just a very tan man.
Or, just maybe the kind of guy you see strung out on meth.
Well, those guys are pale, but
okay.
Somebody who's strung out on meth, but also lives in LA and gets a lot of sun.
So everybody in LA.
Yes.
I think the makeup was all right for him. I would have liked him to be a little more imposing, but part of it is that he's so inconsistent because you get the idea that you're dealing with something much stronger there because we don't see him when he first defrosts and escapes from Crispian's facility. Because, he's like pounding through the metal door, and then later he doesn't appear to be all that strong again until the end.
Well, but he flips over a car in one scene.
That's true. He does flip over the car.
It's a case of, again, he's not really in the movie enough that we get to see the feats of strength.
For the record, he's easily the most likable character.
I guess going back to the makeup, although, he does sort of look like a living corpse and he's tall, he's he's not really scary.
No, he's very... Well, and even in the movie, I mean, he doesn't look like he's in good shape, but he blends in very easily with the people.
He looks like a friendly monster, not like a mean monster.
No, he's like a nice monster, He's like a monster you could have a beer with.
Exactly. There's really not a lot to say about him, unfortunately.
No, I think we've exhausted what there is to say about the Frankenstein's monster. There's just so much in this movie, but so little of it seems of any importance.
There were 2 cameos, though, in this movie. And by cameos, I mean the house from...
House on Haunted Hill.
Yes, I forgot the name. Crispian, it's not really a castle so much as it's like... I think it's called like Stone Manor or Stone Mansion or something. He's got his castle in quotation marks. Most times you see it, it's like a model, I believe. I remember thinking it was a model when I was watching it. But some of the exterior shots, when they pull up, it is the house that was used in...
The Vincent Price House on Haunted Hill.
I keep forgetting the name.
Which, I did not notice that at all. Bones is pretty good about noticing these kind of things. But I will say it blew my mind. I'm like, wait a second.
I'm good at noticing these things, but I can't remember anything.
Yeah, he can't tell you much about what happened in the movie, but he knows exactly where that model's from and where that set's from.
The big giveaway, apart from just the layout, is it's got these weird stones that are like, there's like a spiral pattern cut into them. And I believe in real life, I think it might be like a waste treatment plant. I might be mixing that up with another, but there's a building I know in Canada that gets used a lot in movies, like In the Mouth of Madness, and it is a water treatment plant, I'm pretty sure. One of the two is a water treatment plant, but they show up consistently in movies for some reason.
Well, there you go. There's your little piece of trivia for the day.
Yes, and the other thing that was featured in the movie is a single Smashing Pumpkins song, Bullet with Butterfly Wings.
Yes, I thought that was, as much as it was a little on the nose, I enjoyed it. The world is a vampire.
It's a little quicker than that, but yes.
Look, I'm doing my best.
You're doing your best.
Every day, Bones, I roll out of my bed in my ducal palace and I just try my best.
But no, one of the better scenes in the movie is, for some reason, all of the police force has decided that vampires are real and they're going to go out and they're going to help Detective Coyle stick it to them.
Oh, yes. To get you this, too, not only does this have, a few horror movie cliches, but this has, all of, the cop movie cliches. And he's like, if you go back there, Coyle, you're going to have to turn in your badge. And he's like, here it is. And then all of these cops who've suddenly just now finally bought into the idea of vampires or something, and many of which we've never really seen them have any interactions, positive or otherwise, with Coyle, just decide, okay, and they all throw their badges on the table to go storm the nightclub without a warrant.
Yeah, yes, all of the cops show up to the nightclub and they pass out crosses and stakes and proceed to kill every vampire in the building.
Actually, it's kind of awesome. They just storm this nightclub and there's just cops and vampires murdering each other all over the place.
You see, the thing is, when I was watching, I noticed no cops die. It is all vampires getting the crap beat out of them, to the point where I was thinking, wow, these vampires are really not good.
Maybe people are being a little rough on the LAPD. Because they got out there and they solved business.
Yes, the vampire problem was cleared up very quickly. And then the climax is after, the LA cops beat up all of the vampires. A fire breaks out and Crispian decides that he's just going to kill himself.
Yes, he re-kidnaps Grace and doesn't like her anymore because she's been cured of werewolf being a werewolf, which we're going to talk about that in a second, because
Yeah.
that was one of the more interesting things in the movie. And Coyle comes there to save him, and you have no idea how he's going to kill Crispian, but it doesn't matter, because Crispian's like, well, fine. Chick doesn't dig me anymore. I'm going to just jump into the flames.
It was extremely anticlimactic.
Yeah, it's like, would it have been too much for... I mean, Lord knows we have all this runtime, could Detective Coyle not have staked him or done something, cool,
I don't think... I mean,
Or could we have saved him from another day?
Coyle might have killed, like, a background vampire in the nightclub fight, but I think throughout this entire movie, I don't think he kills a single thing.
No, he mostly just goes from place to place.
And acts angry.
He acts like an angry little sweaty man.
But no, that scene where they cure Grace of her werewolfism.
Yeah, so at one point, when Coyle is going to the castle, he has a silver bullet in his gun. And at one point, Grace kind of loses control and turns into a wolf and is like running at him. So he like shoots her with the silver bullet. But then immediately after the Frankenstein's monster deals with Crispian the first time, he takes her body, which is still very much in wolf form, drives it to a hospital, holds all the doctors at gunpoint, and makes them remove it, then let her die, and then bring her back. And it, like, cures her of her lycanthropy.
But the best thing about that scene is he's literally carrying around a wolf dog, and he forces, the staff to put this dog on a table, and they've got it like, they've got the sheet over it, and they've got it hooked up to the machines, and they've got one of those, like, breath masks that they put over people when, like, their heart stopped or whatever, but they've got it, like, crudely over the dog's mouth. It definitely doesn't fit or go there.
And I think that thing has to have a seal to work.
Yeah, and they're the thing is he like tells them to let it die while they're trying to, keep the dog alive. And it's like, what are these surgeons going to do to keep the dog alive?
Yeah, they were having a rough day.
It was going to die even if he hadn't told them to let her die. What made the scene even funnier is classic Florida man moment. There was an article about a Florida man who held, I believe, a vet hostage because he wanted the vet to make the dog immortal. And that's all I could think about as Coyle held these poor surgeons hostage.
Hey, make no mistake. The vets know how to do it, but Big Pharma won't let them.
Big veterinary.
Big vet. If all the dogs are immortal, where would they be, okay? How much money do you think they would rake in?
Times like these just really disgust me.
Well, I hope you know that anytime this podcast seems bad, it's really a meta-commentary on how the film is too long and kind of bad.
Yeah, no, this podcast has been all over the place, but that's a metaphor for how the movie was, all over the place.
How life is all over the place and kind of bad.
So, I can't really think of much else.
Oh, I can. There's one more thing I want to touch on.
Okay.
The bat vision.
Oh, yeah, the bat that he sees in Predator. Well, I say he sees in Predator heat vision, but unlike in the Predator movies, you can sort of make out a little bit better what he's actually seeing.
Well, and like in the Predator, it's very obviously thermal vision, where I was debating throughout the film what it was supposed to be portraying, because it's not quite thermal vision, and some things just look normal, while other things kind of have like this greenish tint. I don't know if it's supposed to like represent like the echolocation, but that is not where that would not have been my first guess.
Yeah, I don't think it really is thermal vision. I think it is just monster vision. And I definitely don't think that they were going with the echolocation a bit, especially since he can very obviously see. Well, I say he can very obviously see. Maybe he's like the Daredevil from the Ben Affleck movie.
That's
where
what I was thinking.
he's just, except they don't tell you that he's seeing, all the sound vibrations.
See, I wish that they would really double down in a vampire movie on like on the bat stuff, and just have like the vampire like just randomly screech so he can wait for all of the sound waves to bounce back.
That would, I'm just gonna level with you. That movie would be very funny, but it would not be very good.
Like most of the movies we're gonna watch.
Exactly. So, made-for-TV movie. With the made-for-TV movies you've seen, how does it stack up compared to those?
Oh man, it's kind of in the middle of the pack. Because, when you say made-for-TV movie, it's not fair because I immediately think of the best one, which we'll definitely have to cover, but that would be Kolchak the Night Stalker. Look, anybody listening right now, you can fight me on this, but Kolchak the Night Stalker is the greatest made-for-TV movie ever made. I don't know, if it had been paced a little better, I'd rate it a lot higher. Because like I said, I had to take a break after we watched the first half. I'm like, I'm tired of this movie. I want to go play video games or anything, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second half, I was pretty much having fun the whole way. I don't know. I'm not sure that this one would be a recommend for me.
For me, it would be a recommend if there was a way to watch it that wasn't like a bad VHS rip. Maybe those shady websites where you can buy a burned DVD has, just the perfect, most pristine 4K copy of it. But I can't help but feel like it's also just going to be crap, and also I wouldn't buy from those websites.
No.
So there's really not a great way to watch it. It's not funny bad, and it's not bad. It's not even bad. It's just kind of It's like, I've seen this movie that no one else has seen, and that's really maybe the main appeal of it. I mean, I guess if you like spooky or just horror-related stuff and you need something to watch, I would check it out. But it's not that bad, and it's not that great. It's just kind of
Like I said, I probably would have been a lot kinder to it if it wasn't, the length of 2 movies.
As far as made-for-TV movies go, it is sort of middle of the pack or lower. The thing about made-for-TV movies, though, is the stuff at the bottom are also kind of great because they're awful.
I'll give it this. And for a lot of made-for-TV movies, because especially since they tend to be a little bit lower budget, they can be a little more creative or interesting in some of their decisions just because, they don't have to go to theaters and make billions of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
As bad as I've been to this film, I mean, if it was Sunday afternoon and it was randomly on television, which, it's never going to be randomly on television, but if it was, you could do worse than catch this movie.
Yeah.
Just be aware that you're in for a long ride and that it kind of reminds me of an overly long CSI episode with Dracula thrown in. So if you like CSI and you want more werewolves and stuff in it, this might be the miniseries for you.
However, when we say CSI, there's really very little crime scene detection. It's more of just the vibe.
Yeah, no, it's the vibe of like the nightclubs and the questioning and the cynicism.
Cynicism.
And that one lady,
Georgia Fox.
Yeah, she really does enhance the CSI-ness of it.
I guess I didn't really talk about anybody who made or was in this movie. It was made by a guy named Peter Werner, or Warren. I'm going to guess it's Werner. It's Werner. I'm guessing Werner. And he directed it, and then a guy named J.B. White wrote it. And pretty much with all of the actors, it's just about everyone is just like a TV actor. So if you watch a lot of TV, or did watch TV, you might recognize some people.
And to their credit, I don't remember any of the acting being especially bad. Some of the way that scenes were cut left a little something to be desired, but most of the acting was competent.
Yeah, and that's the thing about like Detective Coyle, is I'm thinking it was less the actor and more just the writing for him.
Yeah, and like I said, he wasn't completely unlikable. He's just very angry.
Yeah, he's just very uptight. But Yeah, nobody other than Georgia Fox has really done anything that really stands out to me as being particularly notable, other than the director did direct several episodes of Moonlighting, which is a show I really like. I don't know if you've ever...
I've seen Moonlighting.
You've seen Moonlighting,
with
but I
Bruce
don't
Willis, right?
Yes, but I guess I'm curious as to how many people have actually seen Moonlighting, but that's not important.
We're starting our sister podcast, the Moonlighting Podcast, where we review every episode of Moonlighting. That's not happening. This will probably be cut.
Not a chance. Well, speaking of podcasts, speaking of this podcast, what are we going to be talking about next time?
Well, I have a real winner for us. Next time, we'll be watching another classic, The Robot Monster.
Oh, what? I've seen it before. We aren't going to talk about it now, but why are you doing this to me?
Well, you made me watch a almost 3-hour-long episode of CSI, so now we're going to watch The Robot Monster. Besides, let's be honest, you can't have a podcast like this and not
talk about Robot Monster.
Here's your chance to rip it off like a Band-Aid.
Yeah, we're getting it out of the system early, but this has been another episode of Cult is King. Again, if you will, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button and hit the comment button and do all the things that spread this beautiful scuffed podcast around. And again, thank you for listening. Goodbye.